Hey,
Hey Nick,
how's it going?
good. How are you?
Good. That looks so cool. This art.
I try. It's nerve-wracking because they're on easels instead of on the wall
Right.
because we'd have 1,000 holes in our wall at home, which I'm avoiding if I can. But yeah, it's good to see you. And for everyone joining, we have Nicolas Bruno here today. Here are the two works that we'll be speaking about, as well as some upcoming projects and Nicholas's work in general. So for everybody who is unfamiliar with Nicholas's work, he is a photographer. These are all images that he's taken locally, and they're inspired by his sleep paralysis, which he will be speaking about a bit more today. So Nicholas, if you don't mind, just let us know how you began with photography as your medium and what led you to channel your experience as you slept into this medium.
Sure. I remember being 5 or 6 years old. My mom used to buy me disposable cameras, and I used to go out in my yard and shoot them. And then I would get them developed, and I'd be like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And I have a whole album of work that I've done when I was like 5, 6, and I look back on those and just kind of see where that's pretty much where my inspiration began, just with like a camera. Then when I went on to middle school, I fell in love with Photoshop. Went into high school, and then I saw they had a digital photography class, and then I thought, why don't I unite my love with photography with Photoshop? Because I was originally starting with graphics and just editing different pictures I saw online. So I started doing that. I fell in love with it. I started excelling in my school, and then I decided I might as well go out and pursue this in higher education. And while all this was happening, maybe when I was like 14, 15 years old, I started suffering from sleep paralysis each night. I didn't know what was happening, so what I would do is I would write everything down in a journal. My art teacher told me to start keeping a journal. He was pretty much my mentor in a way, and I would start sketching and writing down what I would see. And once I had all of those sketches, I looked at them and thought, why don't I unite these sketches with my photography? So I started creating visualizations of some of the characters I've seen, some of the things I've felt, and that pretty much started my whole series on turning something so negative, which is sleep paralysis, into something positive that I can share with the world. And I found that by putting that work out there, it awoken a lot of other people and made them aware of the sleep condition, because not many people talk about it. And I feel that my art gives people a way to talk about it in a universal language.
Absolutely. It's something that people perhaps may not understood much about, or they felt uncomfortable or embarrassed to speak of it. And one of our many favorite things about hosting your work at the gallery is that with all the visitors that come in, both those that are aware of your work and those who are just walking in and finding about it for the first time, they've all been able to share, if not their personal experience, but their loved ones. And it's something that opens them up and it creates that dialogue, which is so important for art to, be a part of. And it's awesome. You get people from all different ages and backgrounds, and we get that a lot. But of course, opening up so personally about something such as this, I think, is a bit remarkable.
Thank you.
And so they're always quite grateful to you, I think, for giving them that courage and being able to kind of confront these things, because leaving them deep inside, I'm sure, as you've experienced, is not a way to deal with it. And it probably just gets harder. So have you found then that as you've channeled these experiences and these characters, the sleep paralysis itself has lessened in severity or in frequency?
I think what happens is once you become repetitious in keeping a dream journal and exploring something like the subconscious and exploring your dreams, you start to notice patterns. You start to become comfortable with some of the terrifying aspects, like waking up, not being able to move, and seeing somebody at the foot of your bed. It happens so often, and if you start engaging with it in a positive way, such as through art, through music, just even through just writing, maybe even a poem about it, you start to gain like internal strength, and you start to be able to rationalize what's actually happening. Like, you're not going to actually get killed by one of the figures at the end of your bed. They're a figment of your imagination. So, but in the moment, it feels like they're about to. So if you start using art and using that to rationalize what's happening in the dreams, you might become more comfortable with what goes on. So for me, for example, I'm able to now have one of these dreams, look at what goes on in it, write it down in my journal, and I can sit there and observe without letting the fear overtake me completely. I can kind of try to remember what goes on, and that will inform the next piece that I create. It just becomes a great process of turning something negative into something positive.
Absolutely. And I think it's also interesting to note a bit more about your technique because based off of what you just said, you would start sketching what had come out of you through your dreams and eventually it would lead to the photography. And of course, in between all the set building, the location scouting, the costumes, I mean, your work is not just photography, it's more of, building these worlds and recreating these experiences. So, for everyone that is not familiar, like the bed, for instance, and all the furniture pieces here, these are pieces that Nicholas had to source. He had his vision, he knew what he wished to achieve, and he had to spend a considerable amount of time finding these pieces. Further, if he can't find what he needs, he builds them. So I don't think in these pieces, I mean, obviously this built over here, but there are some cases where he's actually built. Oh gosh, I apologize for the glare. We're not in the
Oh,
best visual conditions
it's
right
okay.
now, but it's a very tedious and involved process for him. And so for those who were not familiar, that's a big part of his work. So it seems that it stuck with you, kind of drawing out sketches and drawings leading to the building of the sets and the photography from your earliest, I guess, channeling of these dreams.
Right. It's been a really cool process to kind of have my hand in every part of the image because I did start by, I guess the first handmade things I used to make were masks because a lot of the figures I would see, um, they would be faceless. So how can I interpret how this person would look if I was photographing them in an art form? So I've developed like canvas masks that go over the face. Sometimes I've invented different masks with like, my earliest ones had like lenses where sometimes they'd have like a gaping white hole in their face. So I would put that there. And that just kind of got me interested in, oh, I could do costume design and really express my idea of how these people look in my dreams. Or I can interpret the things that I see or feel into symbolism where maybe I'm using a pile of furniture like you're showing here, crushing this character who's just trying to enjoy his tea there. Um, so there's different ways to convey ideas through either through sculpture, through costume design, or even found objects. And I find it fun to either, if I can't, well, I try to keep everything low budget. So if I can't build it or buy the prop that I need, I'll look on trash day and see if I can find something like the bed, for example, in the other image. I found that on the side of the road. And what I did was it used to be like a beautiful white bed, but I wanted it to look all nice and torn and worn. So I painted it with a brown matte paint and I scratched it up to give it a little bit more of a worn feel. And I went out to the location, dragged it out there, set up this bed. I built a structure. So I actually broke the middle of the bed and united it in a V. So it would bend in a little bit rather than stay straight upward. And it gave more of an aspect of like the bed is sinking inward and my character is drowning as well. Because that's one of the feelings you feel during sleep paralysis.
And you choose to depict yourself always and all the different characters that pervade your work. On occasion, you might have another male or a female if the story is needed, and because of, again, your manipulation of the image in Photoshop later, it's a necessary attribute. Do you find that having as you specifically helps you deal with the sleep paralysis a bit more? And do you also find that because often your characters are cloaked, the anonymity of that allows other people to connect a bit more?
Correct. So for me, like for example, in this image, I'm basically reliving my dream in real life where I'm actually drowning. That's like a feeling that I get, and I'm in my bed and I can't move, and you can see there's rope laced around everywhere, and it's holding up my pillow. So me going out there and modeling for each of my images allows me to relive each experience, well, dream experience in real life and actually have control over what goes on rather than being in the dream and being at the mercy of whatever happens in my room. It's just a therapeutic process. And it is kind of funny that I put myself in these scenarios again, which are uncomfortable, like being in the middle of a swamp covered in mud in freezing water. But once I'm done with the shoot, I pack everything up and I get in my car and I'm ready to go home. I'm just like, wow, I relived something traumatic, but in a positive way. And now I'll be able to go home, edit that picture and share it with the world and hopefully inspire other people.
And you're completely immersing yourself in that and you're confronting it with your control over the situation at the end of the day. So I don't have a psychology background, but I imagine that it's a very therapeutic process at the same time, reliving this experience on different terms.
Correct. I think I want to encourage that for anybody, even if you're not a professional artist, even if you've never picked up a pen or pencil, if you have a personal experience that you've been dealing with that you've kept bottled up for a long time, I think it's important to just tackle it in a way where it kind of just takes it out of your head, puts it onto paper, or maybe into a song or maybe some a different medium, it feels like a little release valve, and you can decompress, put that onto pen and paper, and maybe you keep it in your own little journal here and you never share it with the world. But I think it's important to share it online because you can help that 14-year-old kid in his room right now who's suffering from sleep paralysis and he doesn't know what to do. If you can put that out there and he sees it, maybe he'll start making his own work. I'm just a huge advocate for art as a therapy, especially for younger kids.
Absolutely. And there's so many people that will connect and will be able to relate. And it gives them a voice too, which sometimes they don't know they have until that right image or that right inspirational individual comes along to share with them. So it's always so great of you. We should, make sure we definitely mention how, brave you are and how kind you are to share your personal stories, because these are dark moments and they're very difficult moments for you to confront in general and to put it out there. So people have that sense of openness and that sense of community, I think is a really beautiful thing and something that I'm grateful to you for, as well as I know thousands upon probably more people are too. So
Yeah, thank you.
So you're welcome. All right. So a couple of questions have come up. So I will put my questions to the side for now so everyone can have their chance. The
Sure.
first one's from Gina. So hi, Gina. She's wondering, the same figures visit you multiple times, or are they different every time?
So I do have recurring figures, one being the hatted man, who's a silhouetted man wearing a hat. I can't see his face or anything about his body. He's just basically an entity that will either stand at the foot of my bed or enter my room, or sometimes he'll hover above my bed. And I've also had the old hag, which is a woman in a dress, and that's been documented throughout history. If you look back and you search the old hag, it's a stereotypical sleep paralysis entity that you would see during dreams. Some people attribute it to something religious, or a lot of cultures, I think in South America, they see it as like a very big religious thing where you might have to get blessed by a priest. So she's shown up for me a lot, and I do depict her in my work a lot. And sometimes what happens, I get surprised too, where figures will show up that I've never even seen before. Like, for example, I was shooting in South Carolina, and I was staying at a friend's house, and I was staying in his guest room, and I woke up in sleep paralysis, and the closet doors burst open. It was this really large man, almost like not obese, but he was huge. He almost didn't look, he looked like half man, half beast in a way. And he was able to shoot these like weird tendrils out at me, and it attacked my throat, and he felt like he was draining my life force. So I'm always surprised by some of the things that I do see, but there are definitely frequent visitors that come back and forth.
It's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure that with your subconscious experiencing, especially with social media, this prominent visual culture that we now live in too, and so many artists channeling darker imagery as well through a multitude of mediums. I mean, deep inside, all of these ideas are just giving your imagination more fuel, I suppose, to generate these additional characters now, where I wonder if the prevalence of certain characters like the old hag in the past, when we weren't inundated with so much visual content, were a bit more prolific. And I mean, of course, the mind can imagine on its own, but we're inspired in every way now possible because of all that we have at our disposal. So it's interesting to note. Next question. How long does it usually take to set up for a photo?
So what I do, I mean, when I create a photograph, I'm pretty much the only person working on it. I'm a solo team. If I don't have like my girlfriend or my sister or a close friend coming with me on the shoot. So the majority of the time is spent actually making the props and costumes. Sometimes I'll take 1 to 2 weeks just to create all the set stuff that I need to make the image. And then what I'll have to do is go out to the location. I pack everything into my truck, and I drive there, and it'll take me about an hour and a half to 2 hours just to get everything from my truck, maybe a mile through the woods or maybe a mile down the coastline to get to the location that I want. I normally work in like very remote locations for my pictures because I think it adds a lot of ambiance to it. So maybe an hour and a half getting ready just to get to the location. And when I'm shooting, I try to keep the window of my shooting time for each image maybe within 15 minutes to a half hour, because so many things can change, especially like, for example, the image that you have there with the water. They're both water. The one with the teacup. I'm in a channel there, and it's a tidal channel. So what happens is it'll drop, the level of the water will drop really quickly when the tides change. So I'm battling the tide, I'm battling what's going on in the background, like the clouds, the rain, the light. So I have to make sure everything is all shot within a small window so I can piece everything back together. So like if I was shooting this and I spent an hour and a half, the light may change. And I'm trying to piece together me with like another picture of like the chair there or maybe the table. And then the lighting situation is wrong for both of them. I can't use those together because I don't want to push it too hard in Photoshop. I try to keep it minimal for my Photoshop where everything has to happen in front of the camera. And when I piece everything together, I'm not like cutting and then pasting and moving different things. I want everything just to be layered on top of each other as a composite. And it keeps it believable. And I found that my viewers respond better to it. And it just, the eye can naturally see when something is real and set up there. And we can so easily pick apart what's photoshopped and what's not. And I'm trying to create a lot of realism within surrealism. That's my goal for this. So that's why I try to keep everything within that small window of time.
You absolutely do. And it's important to note for new followers of Nicolas through this story that oftentimes his imagery has him multiple times in one photograph. And that's him setting up multiple photos being taken as he moves around and he fulfills his narrative. And it's through that layering method in Photoshop, and dependent, of course, on the light and the time of day and all the additional variables, as he's mentioned, to make sure that it's completely fluid. So it pieces together, as you said, naturally and realistically. And with your settings specifically and all those variables, you tend to like the more antique palettes, which I think you've mentioned to me before come from an overcast setting of weather, which is quite fickle. Tell us why you seem to like that more atmospheric approach to your landscapes, as well as if you pick particular areas like this local to your town specifically, where that comes from too.
Sure. I'll just start with my locations. I shoot pretty much everything on Long Island, either in Northport or in my surrounding towns. I grew up exploring the woods, the beach. I had my best memories in these areas. And I like to channel that energy and go back to these places that I used to explore as a kid and now use them to serve the art that I'm creating. I feel like it has that, for some reason, I feel like the energy lends itself to it. And I feel the most comfortable creating in these spaces. And it helps me express what I'm trying to express. And other than that, I like to look at like antique furniture or making things that seem like they've been from 100 or 200 years ago. I look at a lot of romantic paintings, and particularly like Caspar David Friedrich. I love his work. I like what they've done in those paintings because they've broken a lot of traditional art rules. They've brought in a lot of moody and dreamy themes that normally weren't in art, and they were very personal and deep. And I want to do what they've done, but in photography. I feel like it's kind of interesting to look at a different medium and reinterpret some of the styles that they use and create something completely new out of it, where I'm not just painting from the old masters. I'm looking to the old masters for how they set up their shots or their paintings, or maybe the color tones that they use, and then I can emulate that in my photography and give it an extra level of interest.
Absolutely. And I think a really important word you mentioned is mood. Mood is really a huge component of your work. It's not just the narrative, it's not just a personal experience, but it's the mood that is set, and that is through your location selection, the anonymity of the remote areas, the cloaked figures, and the atmosphere, that it has such a strong role in your work. So more questions. Do you ever have the same dream or nightmare multiple times?
I do, and it's not fun, but each time I go through them, I feel a little bit better, and then I'm able to kind of, again, rationalize what's happening. Um, like, for example, I often find myself drowning in my bed, and I can't do anything about it. But that's informing that aspect of me drowning in my bed. I can use that as a symbol and reinterpret it. Like, for example, a lot of my characters, actually both of these in these images, are halfway submerged. So I use that aspect of being above water and below water as a simile for being awake, which is above the water, and being asleep, which is below the water. And my characters are stuck in between those two realms. And that helps me express what it's like to be in sleep paralysis. So these reoccurring nightmares that I have, I see them as messages, and I see them as kind of like a push to try something that could help me better express what's going on. I find them helpful. I mean, they're annoying to have and they're scary to have, but I find them that they help me drive my artistic process. That's why you'll see a lot of reoccurring maybe props or themes within my work, because I'm pushing a narrative that's coming through my subconscious. Sounds kind of crazy or weird, but that's how I see it.
No, I think it sounds perfect and beautiful. I think that it's incredible that you're channeling, these conditions and you're making them so real all over again for you and also for your viewers and the community that has blossomed because of you. And so someone else came up with a question. How does it feel revisiting your nightmares when you're setting up and doing the photo shoot? And how do you overcome these thoughts and emotions?
I think just getting out there, like when I know I'm about to go do a shoot, I feel I get kind of like the same burning anxiety that I get when I'm waking up in sleep paralysis. It's kind of weird how the day almost evolves as if I'm going through the dream itself, where I start with that anxiety of like, I need to go out, shoot this, get all these things done, where then I get there and I start going through it. I'm powering through the photo shoot. I'm covered in mud. I'm in a mask. I can't see what's going on because I'm modeling for the image. So I'm fighting through some of the difficulties, the physical difficulties of just creating the shoot itself. And then once I come back and I look at my camera and I see the images and I'm ready to go home, I just feel so much better about what I did. And that's like me waking up. It's funny how the sleeping world and the real world have similes to each other, except in the real world, I come out with something that I can show everybody rather than try to express through words. Like I've tried to tell, when I was younger, I tried to tell my parents what was going on. They thought it was a nightmare. I told my friends, they thought I was insane. So I'm just really happy that I found this artistic process to express what's going on with me.
I think that's really beautiful and really well put. Let's see. Thank you guys for all the nice comments too, by the way, and keep sending your questions over. Next question is, do you create every single dream idea you have into a picture or do you discard some?
So I have a lot of images on the back burner or on like my drawing board back here or in my journals. I can't get to every single one of them, and I eventually will, mostly because of whatever budget I have. I have like little to no budget for my work, so it takes me a long time to source certain props. Like for example, the wishing well image that I've done recently, where am I supposed to find a wishing well on Long Island? It's almost impossible, and where can I actually go and photograph that thing? So um, I have my art studio now, and that was an idea I had a very long time ago. I'm now able to build that wishing well out of foam and other found objects and express an idea that I had on the back burner for almost 3 years. And now I'm actually able to do it. So I'm just accumulating a log of what's possible now, what's possible in the future. And I do just get rid of some. It's not that I don't get rid of them. I don't explore some of the ideas because one, maybe they're not possible in real life. Like for example, having a figure floating above me. I mean, you could do that in Photoshop. I don't know how interesting it would be, or maybe people would pick it apart because it looks like Photoshop. There's some ideas that I don't like to explore literally, or maybe what I'll do is I'll look at them and find one element from that dream and combine it with another one to make it more interesting. Because some are just not interesting at all, but they have one aspect to it. Maybe it's like stuff falling off of the shelf, or maybe there's like smoke coming out of the base of my bed. Like maybe I can unite those two concepts and make something new out of it. That's what's kind of fun about it too, is I can piece them together.
Absolutely. And it's again bringing the viewer in. Maybe they've had certain ingredients in their dreams and nightmares that now they're recognizing in your imagery. And to be too specific or limited in the content rules some of those people out. So I think from the connectivity standpoint, it's great. So let's see. Have you ever done something that's based on someone else's dream? That's a good question.
Yeah. So I've definitely been inspired by other people's dreams. I've done a few personal projects for people where I've reinterpreted their dreams and created an image for them. Um, I haven't necessarily put them out there online just because it's a personal thing, and I want the people that commission me to do it. I keep that as a separate entity. One public one I've done is for the band Hollow Bones. I actually reinterpreted the lead singer's dream and his struggle with mental illness, and I reinterpreted that and put that out, and they use that as their album cover. So it's a really cool process to read other people's dreams and reinterpret them and try to get as close as I can without actually being that person. Because like you'll have a dream, but you can never express it as well as you can to someone just through words. But through art, I feel like you have an advantage because you can do different things like change the mood with a color palette, or maybe you can write a song about it, like what she's doing. I really enjoy doing that. And what's cool is I've put out a poll where people were able to send me their dreams anonymously. And I've been going through them and looking at them and connecting similar themes or characters that people are writing about. And it's been really cool to see how the whole human experience, no matter where you live, there's always that one connecting or a few connecting aspects to dreams that exist for like the whole, like humanity as a whole. I want to learn more about that. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but I feel like we're all connected in a weird way through our subconscious.
I think so too. And I think that we're all taking the same ingredients, but through our own experiences and interpretations, we're bringing something new out of all of that. And it's so fascinating to experience one person's dream versus another and see the common elements, as you mentioned, but also to see how they stand apart as individuals. And it's just a reminder of how similar we all are. But at the same time, we're all so special because of our unique differences. And those should be celebrated, of course, but also connect us. So let's see, more questions. Have you had a lot of nightmares when you were a child? Could you talk about your childhood a little bit?
Sure. I was a nightmare kid. Like I had them all the time. Um, my most vivid one from being like, I guess 3 or 4 years old, I would walk out of my bedroom and there would be, I guess, like this dinosaur looking thing. I mean, obviously it sounds childish because that's from the brain of a child, but it would like attack me and I would try to run to my room, but it would bite me and pull me back into the hallway sort of thing. I remember there's a character that I would go outside on my lawn and he would be like emitting static. Like he was almost like made of electric, shooting electric everywhere. And I couldn't move and I would see him and he would kind of catch, I guess we would lock eyes and I would not be able to move. So I had a lot of crazy, weird things going on through my childhood, especially in middle school. I wonder if it's because I love video games and I love like Legend of Zelda and all these things. And I always see these monsters and I'm fighting them in the game. I feel like that kind of leaked into my subconscious when I was younger. I had a great childhood, but for some reason I'm in tune with something in my subconscious that generates nightmares. I don't know why I'm susceptible to it, but that's just been my experience ever since I was a little kid.
I think that it's interesting to think about too how, your generation, I'm a little bit older than you, a lot, I suppose, but my generation too, we grew up with, as you mentioned, video games and a lot more, story and a lot more violence, I think, and negative images that kind of has saturated us mentally a bit. And so now we're a lot more accustomed and used to seeing very gory, very aggressive, and very painful imagery as the norm because of because of popular culture and these video games. And so at a young child's age, maybe you weren't hearing as many, folkloric tales and fairy tales that might have had a darker undertone, but now instead you're immersed in this world of video games and these shows and these movies that reflect such. And I wonder from a psychological and historical standpoint, if there was a way to measure someone's dreams at that age, before all of this immersion of, visual culture to now, how that might compare and how it might contrast too.
Absolutely. Now, I think if there's any parents watching this, I would love for parents, like when I become a parent, I would love to set my kid up with a dream journal and start that very young because a lot of kids are terrified to go to bed. They'll come into their parents' room and go to sleep like next
Yeah.
to them or on the floor. And I feel like if you're able to work with your child and keep that journal for them and you could write it for them or draw it with them, it would be powerful for them to kind of just communicate it and put it into a book that they can look at and again begin to rationalize. I think it could be a really powerful tool.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I hope people take you up on that. So, next question. How do your dreams influence other aspects of your thoughts?
um, I'm definitely like an anxious person. I guess it plays on with a lot of anxiety, but I'm always thinking about art and I'm always thinking about creating stuff. And I guess my dreams are always at the forefront of my mind because that's what I'm so engaged in. Um, I definitely like to pursue some of the ideas that I explore whenever I'm having like a normal dream, for example, like I'm diving really deep into like a pond somewhere and I find something at the bottom. Like maybe that will inspire me. Like for example, I from that dream, I made my treasure hunt idea where I went out to Long Island, an island out here, and I actually buried a box of treasure and I released the coordinates online and people were able to go and find it. So like I guess my dreams inform. I always try to use that information to either create something that's art related, or maybe it gets me to go outside and shoot my bow, or it gets me to make a new costume of some sort. Even if it's not related to my own project, maybe I'm making like leather armor or something like that. I feel like it's just a constant stream of suggestion. And I feel like if you're not open to those suggestions, you're doing yourself a disservice.
I agree with you. I think that's a great answer. The next question is, did you go to art school? And if so, where did you go?
I did. I went to Purchase College. I got my BFA in photography and minor in art history in 2015. I absolutely loved going there. What was cool about going there was there's so much freedom. There are classes, but when you're on your off time, you can go into the visual arts building. It's open 24/7. I'm not sure if it is now, but it was when I was there. And you could walk into the wood shop and you can learn about creating how to join wood together, or you can go into the metal shop and learn how to weld. And that's where I actually fostered and worked on a lot of my hand skills, which are a huge part of my photography. Like I needed to learn how to sculpt things out of wood. I needed to learn how to weld things together for my props. And that just gives me an upper hand and not having for me to go and hire somebody to do this. I can do this within my own studio. It may take me longer to do it by myself, but I have complete control over the props that I make. So I highly recommend, if you're able to, go to college for art and explore things outside of your own wing or your own medium, because you're going to pick up so many different aspects of art.
And I should mention that for, those who don't know Nick so well, I've always thought, as well as our friends and all of our gallery patrons, that he is a bit of a Renaissance man because he's able to tackle so many different challenges with such ease. We would never be able to pick out that well as far as it not being a real well. And his ability to just kind of look at a problem and figure out what material, how to build it, and how to make it look so realistic and blend in so perfectly with his narrative is something really impressive and not something that, every photographer does. So again, awesome. And
thank you.
Yeah, you guys definitely, if you didn't know, should absolutely know that about him. Next question is, can you still remember the dream that made you go like, that's it, I'm done. I need to do something about this. I need to turn this into art?
It was definitely my first experience with the old hag. That still is probably one of the most terrifying dreams I've ever had, and I still get chills thinking about it. The dream itself was I was in my bed, and I woke up frozen as usual, but in the corner of the room, I could sense this entity, and I can't move. I was trying to shift my eyes to the left to see what it was, and it slowly got more powerful, the energy coming towards me, and this old woman shoots over my bed and floats above me and shrieks into my face, like maybe like this close to my face. And she was wearing a dress, and she was like all decrepit looking. So what happened was, in the dream, I was able to leave. I had basically had an out of body experience where I left and I ran downstairs and I tried to get away from it, and then it lapsed back, and I ended up back in my bed. It was like a total, I don't want to say the word, but it screwed with my mind, and it was really traumatizing. And that was the moment where I'm like, I need to do something about this because it's really affecting my mental state. Like I was not in a good place for that whole entire week just because of that.
That's really, you're paralyzed, but all of a sudden you're moving, but you're not moving completely with your body. I couldn't even imagine what that feels like.
It totally messes me up. And I still get those out of body experiences sometimes where I go from sleep paralysis to out of body, and you've tricked yourself to thinking that you're awake, but you're not actually doing it. Like I'm able to leave my bed and try to open my door, but like I'll be doing that, and then I realize that it's not working, and then more weird stuff will start to happen, and then I'll end up back in my bed, and I'm like, what just happened? Did I sleepwalk? But those
the
are
complexity.
I struggle with that.
That's such a complex cognitive experience because you may know at some points that you are dreaming and that this is part of a nightmare, but then all of a sudden you're moving. So then that takes a back seat, and now your mind has to reconfigure all the while when you're, in between being awake and sleeping. It's just, it's incredible. It's obviously horrible and frightening, but at the same time, what the mind can do and how powerful it is to allow you to kind of move from that one state into another and then wake up and have such an emotional response is something to note and really fascinating. So another question popped up. Do you plan out perspectives, point of views for the photographs, or do you decide on set?
So I start in sketching. Like when I'm sketching stuff, what I'll do is I'll have my sketchbook here, and I'll actually grab like one of those like wooden drawing dummies that are about this tall, and I'll set that up in front of me, and I'll move them around and pose them to see how I'm going to set up the actual shot. And I'll do that, and that helps me kind of just work out the sketch. And then sometimes to eliminate mess ups, like when I'm out actually on the shoot after I've dragged all my props there and something doesn't work, I'll actually set stuff up in the driveway of my studio and take a test shoot. Like I'll set up a bed there, and I'll set up my camera, and I'm wearing normal clothes, and obviously I'm not doing like the theatrics of a smoke bomb or anything like that, but it helps me figure out what's possible in the physical world rather than just on my sketch pad, because I've in the past arrived on my set and I'm trying to do something that I've sketched out and it just doesn't physically work, whether it be like for example, the anvil shot that I've done recently. It's actually behind me here. Like the structure was tipping because the anvil was so heavy. So I actually had to rework that while I was at my studio and put weights on the back to keep it from tipping forward. Because if I had gotten to my shoot and tried to do that, it would have been a horrible failure. But if you can do a lot of your work as a surreal photographer, if you can do a lot of your work beforehand, it makes it a lot easier when you're out on your shoot, especially when you're working by yourself.
But I imagine too, with like the different like levels of like hardness and softness of the ground, depending on if it rained or not,
Yes.
elements and variables that are beyond your control until you're there and you're setting up. Have
So
they
many.
then, that's I'm sure affected you, and perhaps some of the imagery had to be altered a little bit just to work within the setting that you're shooting in?
Correct.
Yeah.
Even for like the image with the bed, the water itself, it was maybe around like a foot and a half deep, but I'm like floating upward because we're kind of buoyant. What I had to do was actually get into the base of that and dig downward into the mud with my hands so I could actually go a little bit deeper with my body so you wouldn't see the front part of my chest there. So I always have to like modify the environment in a little bit as much as I can without damaging what's going on. Because you never know what you're going to run into. Like maybe the bed starts falling over or flipping. I always think at least like 3 steps ahead of how I can achieve this by myself and without the environment messing me up, which normally happens, but I try my best to fix it.
Well, you do a brilliant job. No one would notice. It all works and flows together seamlessly.
Yeah.
One day, though, I'm sure you'll have some kind of like footage of you struggling at
I
some
have
point
I
or
have it.
another.
I will
The,
put it out.
the lighter side of it, I guess, the blooper reel of your work.
Yes, many
The
people.
next question is, do any of the figures that present themselves to you ever take the form of a loved one that has passed? Has your dog that has passed ever presented himself as a figure to you?
Interesting. Did they say my dog? Was that
Yeah, yeah,
at
your
the end?
dog.
Yeah.
It was
So
from Gina, so she knows.
that's interesting. Yeah. Um, I've had my dog appear, but not in a sleep paralysis dream, more of a nightmare sort of thing. Where I guess I opened my door and he like ran up to me, but he like bit me on the arm, but it was weird. It wasn't like terrifying or anything like that. It was more of like an embrace. I like to see things not for how literal they are, but maybe the meaning behind it. Like for me, that's like him embracing me here and I'm feeling his touch there. That's like him connecting with me in a way. That's how I would see it. I don't think I've had any I haven't lost a lot of people in my life, thank God. So they haven't really appeared in my dreams. But I guess my grandma had always said maybe that the old tag, maybe even though it's terrifying, it could be like my great grandmother trying to contact me. Or there's different ways to think about it. I don't know how much I believe in spirits coming back through, I guess, in our waking world, but it could be possible through dreams. And I definitely don't discount that at all. And I wonder maybe if it's just stuff I'm not aware of yet. I guess as I get older, maybe I may make that connection. But as for now, I'm open to interpretation and I'll learn more about it as I go through it.
Absolutely. I think always keeping an open mind is incredibly important.
Correct.
Let's see. Next question. What do you do with all your props? Are they yours or are they loaned to you?
So they're pretty much all mine. I don't think I really take props on loan just because I'm always doing something weird, whether it be out in the marsh or I'm setting things on fire. I don't want to damage the props of other people. Um, it's either I make the prop myself, I find the prop and I modify it, or actually my grandma, she actually gives me some of my great grandmother's belongings, like those teacups were hers in that image, which is kind of cool. Or for example, in some of my earlier work, I've had a tablecloth that she's actually knitted together. And I think that's kind of cool to bring in your family history through objects into some of your pictures, whether it be you're creating work like me or you're creating portraits of yourself or your family. Incorporating objects that have some sentimental meaning adds another level of power to the image. But after I'm done shooting, I mean, I keep my props either as like decoration for my studio, like for example, this mannequin back here, I'll keep this and I'll use this. They're also, my props become multifunctional where I'll make my costumes and put that on the model and I'll be able to see how it looks. Or sometimes like in your gallery, I'll exhibit props that I've had as a sculpture piece, or I'll take props apart and use those materials like those mannequin busts that we created for our last show. And I'll make something completely like an art piece that stands by itself as a sculpture. So it's pretty cool how the props come into my life, whether it be through somebody giving them to me as a gift, or I find them myself, and then they find another purpose down the road, whether it be to serve me here, serve me in my income, or to just exist as an art piece by itself.
And a lot of your work incorporates fire. So oftentimes the props that you will be bringing in will find themselves being destroyed completely. Have you done that with any of these personal objects like your great-grandmother's teacups, or is that kind of restricted more to disposable props? And please also tell us more about the symbol of fire and why it appears quite, normally in your work.
Sure. So when I'm burning things, they're generally my props that I've built myself. Like, for example, a dollhouse that I'll build and I'll burn that because I've specifically created this object to burn. I don't burn like heirlooms like that because to me that it defeats the purpose of why I'm putting them in there. And when I'm using fire in my work, that fire symbolizes in my work when I'm waking up and I get that burst of anxiety when I realize I can't move. And it's like this horrible burn. I'm sure that people who have experienced panic attacks before, they know that like horrible pit of energy that kind of bursts here and goes throughout their whole body. That's what I'm symbolizing through that aspect of waking up and realizing I'm about to go through hell. That's why I use that.
That's a great answer. Our next question, and again, thank you guys. Everyone's been sending such supportive words your way, and so I just want to acknowledge you guys. That's awesome. Next question is, just wanted to say thank you for inspiring me and my classmates with your work, which actually gave me inspiration on my final pieces. How does it make you feel knowing your work is so inspiring to others?
I love it. I mean, the reason why the driving force behind my whole entire, I guess, career as an artist is to inspire others to do the same, because if I didn't pursue art when I was 14, 15 years old, I don't know where I'd be. This was my outlet, and I think art is the most accessible thing that you can get to without paying for a therapist or signing up for an online course on how to deal with stress or joining yoga. Like, you can make art with like a pen, pencil. You can make it in your driveway with a stone on your driveway. There's so many ways to access art, and I think it unlocks a part of your brain that helps you deal with stress. I don't know what it is. Again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know how it works, but I totally encourage anybody to explore a medium of their choice, whether they're pretty good at it or they've never even done it before, and just run with it, because you'll find yourself occupied in a space that's not just physical, but it's up here, and you're occupying that space and making great things happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, art has pervaded our history, maybe not always in the form of what was deemed as art during that time, when you have things just as cave paintings or, ways to convey rules to people who were illiterate because reading wasn't taught to certain classes. And so the idea of recognizable imagery is something that as humans, we will always want and need and explore. And I think what's also incredible about Nicolas's work is the fact that for those who haven't experienced sleep paralysis, they still experienced anxiety, panic attacks, all of those, excruciatingly emotional experiences we have as humans. And people can still relate because of the imagery and how accessible it is. But when I say accessible, I don't mean that it's simple. It's just approachable. And people will connect from, again, all different age groups and backgrounds and experiences. And that's what I think makes for a really successful artist and successful artwork. And he also just does it quite beautifully too. So imagery aside, his palettes and just his compositions, they're, as he mentioned, all influenced by historical artists. And so oftentimes you may even see nods to those artists too. So all extremely well conceived.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Another question: how do you transport your heavy props, for example, the bed, to your location?
I pick things up and I move them. It's a real workout. Thankfully, my whole life I've been trying to stay physically fit. I work out a lot and I do like kickboxing and stuff. So I built up my muscles in order to be able to move these props by myself. Or if I have to be inventive, sometimes I'll bring a wheelbarrow and I'll wheel it out if I have to go like 2 miles into the woods. That's a big help. But if you were like the fly on the wall while I'm shooting, you'd see me just like struggling through the woods, like dragging all these things back and forth. It's kind of comical in a way. But that's the only way to do it. I don't want to photograph my bed in my driveway and piece it together. which is fine, totally fine when people are working like that. But for me, I think it's important to have everything on set right there because I think it just adds a level of realism. And I'm working in such a surreal way that there needs to be a level of realism in there because otherwise it may be dismissed as digital art or something else. Well, I mean, digital art is awesome. It's just not what I'm trying to achieve here. If I can do anything like such as like drag an anvil all the way to the shoreline to make my image look just that tad bit better, I think it's worth it. I like to invest my time and my energy into the work.
And I think it truly shows in the final work as well. So that's awesome. More questions. Can you create things within your dreams?
That's interesting.
It is.
While I'm dreaming, I assume.
I think so. This came up in the question section, so it was about 11 minutes ago. If SparkWire is still on, if you don't mind elaborating on that question. They also asked another question. Oh no, we got to that question. I'm sorry. So
I can go on.
You can? Okay.
I'll attack it from two different standpoints.
Perfect.
Can I create things like physically while I'm in dreaming? I guess yes, I've done that before. Maybe I've drawn something, or maybe I've pulled up. Like for example, recently I had a dream that I was in this back, I guess the back of like this weird Italian mansion, but in the courtyard, and there was water, and I had a rope, and I was pulling up all these antique props from the water. It was the strangest thing. I was pulling them out of the water and putting them into my little dinghy boat, and then I tried to sail away with it. And I was like running against the tide and trying to get there with all the stuff, like my treasures that I found. So I guess my brain creates ideas for things in my normal dreams. Maybe I have a part of it, or maybe it's just subconscious. Like I remember seeing pieces of armor, like that was something that was going on there. So I guess I'm able to create stuff, maybe not like I'm going to take a picture, but I guess I create props or ideas that could inform a piece down the road. And otherwise, am I able to create within my dreams in a lucid dream sense? I've had a few lucid dreams that I've actually been able to turn positive, and that's been pretty interesting. Where like I'll maybe dive down into the water and emerge, and I'm in the middle of the ocean, but I can create a boat that will save me, or something like that. That's like another way of creating, I guess, within dreams.
I think those are great answers. Now the next question. Sorry, it kind of pops up here in a weird way. What is the average cost of your works? If you want me to answer that, or if you want to, it's up to you.
I guess you could, but there's a varying range, and I think it's possible that like I have smaller works that are hand embellished that are about this big that are more affordable than my gigantic works that are right behind me here, like that are at 42 by 42.
And they're all editioned except for the smaller pieces. Nicolas also does drawings. As you mentioned, it's a big part of his process, but he does these very beautiful, nostalgic drawings of the start of what he's going to be creating in his photography. And they're ink, and they have this storybook feel to them, although, of course, there's a bit of an ominous note that makes them special and truly what Nick is and what his work is. But then, as you mentioned, he has the embellished pieces that are one of a kinds as well, where he usually does some kind of gold, like gold leaf, I guess we could
24
say.
karat gold leaf embellishments that I do with my brush. It's all done by hand.
Yep. He's actually woven on some with a thread too. So he takes really unique approaches to these images. And once these images are embellished and at that size, they don't appear again in such a manner. And then these, as we have here on my camera above, these are the editions of 7, and they are 22 by 22 inches. And they come both framed and unframed, and that affects the price as well. And then, as Nicolas mentioned behind him, we have the larger edition, the 42 by 42, and that's an edition of 3, and that increases the price a bit too. So if you'd like, I can send you pricing if you want to DM us at the end, or if you want to DM Nicolas, he'll be happy to help you too. But it's also awesome to note that he's always evolving his medium. So mentioned earlier, he brought in sculptures that he had used as props for his photographs for his last show. And he built this incredible box that you look in and you see a scene that he goes through personally. And it's this 3D reenactment of his nightmares. So he's always kind of pushing the envelope and taking it all one step further, which we all love.
Thanks.
So let me see. If you guys don't mind sending questions in the chat, it's a little easier for me to just stay abreast of them. Let me see. Through the process of, okay, so here, I think we didn't get to this one. Through the process of recreating your dreams, What have you learned so far that you apply in real life?
I guess stress management. I mean, outside of art, I mean, I used to get very stressed out, and sometimes even the smallest of adversities that I'd face would be overwhelming, and I would want to stay in my room. I'd become depressed. But just going through these dreams each time, I feel like I just get mentally stronger, and I'm able to deal with real life situations much easier just because I've kind of hardened myself in a way mentally. Um, and I find that I've become more comfortable with myself where I used to be very, very self-conscious of just my being. Um, and I feel like art is a powerful tool to do that and give you self-confidence, whether it be just creating something that you've been struggling with for a long time or just putting yourself out there on the stage. Like I never used to like being photographed, but now I photograph myself for all of my pieces. So that gives me another sense of confidence and just getting into the world of art where I'm having exhibitions and I'm the center of attention, which I don't like to do. It really just pushes like my boundaries, and then I become happier and I can attack different situations. Like even just doing a live stream, it's not something I could have ever imagined doing, but I feel more confident doing it just because I've gone through a lot of turmoil in the past.
Absolutely. And it's funny to note that most artists are a bit reclusive and sometimes even misanthropic. And yet here they are just projecting their emotions and their experiences and everything that they're going through on, you know, onto their canvas, onto their sculpture, onto their photography. And then it's going out into the world and being taken in and loved and hated. And then
Right.
you have to go to these openings and you have to talk to all these people and get photographed. And it's really interesting because it's the exact opposite of what you do for so long. But
Totally wild.
yeah, you do an awesome job, and as do all our other artists too. And
Yeah.
it's always such a pleasure. I get such great feedback when everyone gets to meet you guys, and it really just it connects them further with the work. They connect
Totally.
early on through their own means, but once they get to know you and a bit more about the personal stories that you put into these pieces, it enhances it, and it always makes us all love your work even more. So, all right, we have a bunch more questions. Let's see. In a previous stream, you mentioned music as a source of inspiration. What genres or artists do you listen to while creating?
So I play music too, just by myself. Like I play guitar, drums, piano, a lot of different things that I've been self-taught. My dad's a musician, so I always grew up watching him. So I learned because I was inspired by him. And the lyrics of the bands that I listen to or the solo artists that I listen to can often inform some of the aspects of my pieces. What I will do is I'll listen to, like for example, one day maybe I'm listening to folk music like Iron and Wine. Like I love the way that Sam Beam he takes these complex psychological scenarios and creates beautiful stories that are easy to understand but have a lot of depth to them. So that's like something I'll want to emulate, maybe lyric from that, or maybe just the aspect of how he creates. And I'll try to create something like that. Or maybe one day I'm listening to heavy metal music and I'm listening to like maybe just electronic music with no lyrics, like Tycho, for example, is one of my favorite thinking music bands. All of these artists really inspire me and they kind of just drive the creative process and keep me entertained while I'm here in my studio building something. I can kind of escape to a different world while listening to the music and also keeping my hands busy. It's just really like an esoteric, I want to call it that, experience that I otherwise wouldn't be able to achieve. And I think music is a great driving force behind that.
Absolutely. I think that immersing yourself in creativity, no matter what form, is always going to continue to inspire and motivate.
Yeah.
Do you have any drawings on hand in the studio? Someone asked if she can see some of them.
I have, trying to think. I mean, I have my sketches back here. They're chalkboard sketches. They're not necessarily something that I would want to show you because they're very loosely drawn. I start with a lot of loose drawing before I make final sketches. I have, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to show it, but I have sketches for some of my upcoming images that for a series that I'm creating. I'll flash them quickly here where I'm laying them out and I'm setting up what I need. I'm writing down some of the stuff that I'm going to be building for it. And that kind of just helps me stay organized and understand what types of props I have to build or what kind of costume I have to create for that, or maybe the location or time of day. So that's how I start with that. And sometimes when I create a sketch for a photograph and it doesn't work out, whether I go and shoot it and just looks terrible in photo format, I can fall back and then create just a drawing, a finalized drawing of that. And that helps me, again, communicate ideas through a different medium. It challenges a different part of my brain. And also opens up the eyes to my creative process to different people who love certain mediums. Like, for example, like a collector who loves drawings, they might not enjoy my photographs, but they might enjoy what I draw. So kind of having a vast variety of medium just opens up new eyes to your work.
Absolutely. It's very well said. Our next question. You're amazing in so many mediums, but you gravitate mostly to photography when I see your final works. What about photography makes it your chosen medium?
I find it's the most, I mean, I don't want to dismiss any other mediums. This is just like my perspective on it. I feel like photography is the most relatable medium in regard to somebody who has never looked at art before knows how to look at a photograph because it's the closest thing to real life. So for me to be able to photograph something and make it relatable instantly and then add sculpture and then add costume design that's all strange and different and dreamt up, I feel like it adds a level of entry, and then I'm able to do a lot of weird stuff in this photograph. That I feel like that's poorly explained, but it's the entry level way of looking at art, which is photography, and then you can do more within the world of photography, such as like sculpture and costume design.
And I think it allows you to be realistic too.
Yeah, that too. It brings a level of realism to something that's surreal. Like that's again I've reiterated that a bunch of times, but that's like my philosophy on how I'm creating.
And I think it also allows you to be very autobiographical, which these works are. As much as they're universally experienced and received, they're also deeply personal and about you.
Correct. And I can
So,
be a part of them too. That's like the biggest part too. I can go out and become these characters that have plagued me, and I'm allowed to go and have complete control over what's going on and be part of a physical experience. I think that's so much different than when I'm drawing. Whereas like I have to worry about a lot of technical stuff, whereas my photography is more of a performance, and I think I enjoy that the most.
absolutely. I'm going to address one last question, and then we're going to hit the hour mark.
Sure.
So once I say we need to switch, we'll go and we'll reconnect and go live for a little bit longer.
Okay.
So for everyone whose question I'm not getting to, please come back and join us when we do that in about 3 minutes so we can address your question. If we don't do this, Instagram does kick us off, so we have no choice. But the last question before we go out and come back is, I remember learning that you're influenced a bit from video games. What are some current game influences that have inspired any recent pieces?
Sure. Definitely Dark Souls. Assassin's Creed is one of my favorite series. I like to play that a lot. Legend of Zelda is a huge part of what I like to do. There's actually an old computer game for Windows called Fate, it's like nobody really played it, but I played it as a kid, and it had a lot of beautiful music and textures and monsters and stuff. And so that was one of the games I love to play. I'm sure you can download it for free now. Some other games. Oh, what was that game called that we played? Little Nightmares. That's what it is. That's a really cool game. It's short, but it's fun to play. And that you can definitely see a lot of influence within some of my recent pieces from that video game. So I definitely recommend checking that game out.
All right, cool. So I'm going to turn off and then come back on. So everyone just meet us back here and we'll continue for a little bit longer.
Cool.
And bring your questions so we make sure we get to them. See you guys in a second.
Okay. Cool.
Hey again.
All set.
Okay, so while you guys send your questions back over, let's talk a bit in the meantime about some upcoming projects you're working on.
Sure. So what I've been dreaming up for a long time, there's something that I've always wanted to express, but I've never had the ability to, just because of, I guess, my technical aspects of my work, availability of learning how to do props. But when I was younger, I was at my grandma's house in the basement, and I went into her storage room and I pulled out this box, and inside the box was a stack of these cards, and I was looking at them, and I'm totally intrigued. I'm like 6 years old, and she came downstairs and told me to put those away. You shouldn't touch those. And I would go back in that room and look at the cards over and over, and it turns out that they were a deck of tarot cards, and I was kind of blown away by some of the images that were on there. I'm trying to remember what they looked like, but again, I was a little kid. But Now as an adult, I've remembered that sort of experience of looking at something that was so interesting and mysterious, and now I've been studying the tarot series, and I'm trying to. What I would like to do is recreate the entire tarot series in photographic format and in sculpture and costume design. So actually, the sketches that I'm doing here, I'm working out my ideas of how I'm going to create the series, and then release a whole tarot deck and do exhibition and explore a photo book and all these great things. And I want to explore all the archetypes of the tarot series through the way I create now, because I feel like they inform, like all these archetypes appear in dreams and in life, and I feel like it's just another part of my mind that has opened up just by looking at these.
Absolutely. And it's really fascinating because so many artists do choose to depict the tarot deck, the major arcana or the minor or both, depending. But it's just this common ingredient, again, that you get just interpreted and just, you know, remixed in such a way based off of the person that is going through that creative process. And it's, I think, imagery that never gets old. It never gets overdone. It's always constantly fresh by that person, you know, pursuing it creatively. So I'm very excited to see what you do with this. I've seen so many tarot decks, so many beautiful artworks, illustrations, photographs, all devoted to depicting these stories and these characters. So I'm really excited, and I think it's a great place for your work to evolve to.
I just think it'll
So
be a great experience.
yeah, that too, absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone had asked if you need permits to shoot where you shoot at these locations.
Most of the places I shoot are at public parks, so no. So because I'm creating personal work, so there's no real need to do that. I do get permission to do works on certain areas that are private. Like for example, I've done work at Sands Point Preserve on Long Island, and I've done collaborative stuff with their theater performance. So there's ways to connect with other areas that, like for like a park, for example, maybe you can do some sort of collaborative uh, aspect of your work with them that benefits both parties. And there's ways to get into areas like that. I don't have a huge budget to rent out spots or travel across the world to do things, but I think with Instagram, with Facebook, any social media, if you have the ability to reach out and you have a great idea, create a treatment for it, like a small PDF, or even write something out very simply, and reach out to these places that you want to photograph. And sometimes you'll be able to get lucky and go and work with them and work on these sets without having to pay ridiculous fees.
Absolutely. It never hurts to ask. You'd never know.
Yeah,
Someone's asking if you're from an artistic family.
I would say so. My mom is an amazing gardener. My
And
dad's a
cook.
musician and cook. Yeah,
Yep.
she's a great cook too. My grandma's an amazing cook. My dad's a great musician. He's also he's great at drawing, but he doesn't do it a lot. But I remember being a kid and we would draw at the table and he would draw like these cartoons that were like so well done. I was like, how do you do that? Um, and it's just been cool to be exposed to so many different mediums, even though they're not photographers or sculptors or anything like that. They've still kind of just opened up the creative side of my brain where, like, I would sit at the table again, just drawing random things when I was little. That was like a big part of my childhood. Even though I'm not drawing exclusively as my medium of choice, it still just kind of springboarded me into the world of art.
And so, oh, a couple more questions. Let's see. What is the average cost it takes to make each photograph?
Sometimes it'll cost $0 just because of me accumulating things off the side of the road. Like, for example, I love pallet wood. So I'll take like pallets from the side of the road, whether it be at the beer distributor when they're throwing them out or Home Depot's throwing them out. I'll take that wood, rip it apart, and then I'll make something completely new out of it. Um, Sometimes I can't find something, so I'll buy something on like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist for pretty cheap. Or I'll combine two different things that I found, or maybe two things that I bought for $10 online to make something completely new. So I try to keep everything really low budget, unless I'm doing maybe a collaboration with Nikon or something like that, where I can maybe achieve a prop budget, and that helps me create something completely new. I would definitely love to have a huge budget for my stuff, but I think it's almost more exciting to work with no budget because it challenges you and it makes you think about your materials and be conservative as to what you're using, and also respectful of the environment too. I don't like to buy stuff and then get rid of it. I'll always break it down and make it into something new, just to be conscious of the environment.
For sure. And it also, as you mentioned in other cases, it allows your brain to work in different ways and be more creative, working with a limited budget and limited props too.
Correct. You don't need a huge budget. You can make really cool stuff in your own backyard.
And so the person who asked that question, it's just very sweet. They said that you've helped them through many hard times during school, and hard times in general. And they praise you and your work. And they don't have any more questions, sadly, but they almost want you to know that you have helped them.
That's so cool.
So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for those really warm words. And so let's see, another question. And if we start to go a bit over and you need to get back to the studio, just let me know.
I'm all good for whatever your time limit is.
All right, cool. I mean, if this goes into 2 hours, we'll stop a little bit before then. But
Okay.
for now, the questions keep coming. And there's also a bit more I want to talk about too.
Sure.
Next question. What would your advice be for developing artists and those looking to get more exposure?
You've got to put yourself out there, even if you're not creating a finalized piece, like an image on the wall, even if it's just something as simple as a sketch or a poem that you've written. Start an Instagram account, start a Tumblr account, any sort of a social media account. Create it as if it's your own business, even if you're not looking to go into business. Make that account, start uploading your processes, all the things that you're working on, even if it's something you're never going to really show to the world. It's still worth it to have it in one spot. And then from there, when you start really getting into the swing of things, start curating your own work where you're finding your best pieces or you're finding pieces that make sense together, and then send those to art blogs, send those to feature accounts on Instagram. And once you start gaining traction there, you'll start building a following, and then you may be able to submit to a group show at a gallery. And from there, you may develop your relationship with the gallery and have your own solo show. So it all starts with you taking the initiative to collect your work that you're creating, even if it's just process stuff, put that online and share it with the world. Like, again, we were talking about it's tough being an artist because you just want to stay in your own little world and keep everything to yourself. But I think it's so important and almost like your job as an artist to share what you're creating, because you won't just make your life better, you'll inspire the lives of others too.
Absolutely. I think that's such great advice. And, you know, for anyone just starting out, it's a very courageous thing to put your work out there. So be sure that you're ready to receive all the feedback that you're going to get, but also know that it only carries the weight that you give it. So at the end of the day, there are going to be so many fans that find you and connect, and you've changed their lives, but you might get those that aren't always the best in what they have to say. And that's what art does. Art evokes a response, and it's not always praise and adulation, and that's okay. And you just can't take it to heart. You have to keep going and use these tools as a motivational, methods that they are for you to keep creating your work and that outlet to share it. So yeah, and I love it. I mean, I sit on Instagram all day just losing myself in our current artists and artists that I'd love to work with, and artists that maybe I don't, or I wouldn't show because the aesthetic's quite different, but they're still conveying this incredible message and moving me. So put yourself out there, definitely.
Totally.
Okay, sorry. Questions are going, because I know a bunch more happened and I lost my place. Okay. Have you applied and or received grants for your work?
I've applied to grants. I haven't received like large grants. I've maybe won awards, but grants are definitely something I'm still pursuing, especially for the virtual reality experience that I've been trying to create. It's, I guess, financially intense where I need to get a lot of gear to create something like that. I find it a little bit difficult to apply because I do work in a lot of mediums, and sometimes grants are normally applied to a traditional medium or artists in their mature phase of their work, where I might not be able to apply because the artist has to be 40 years old or more. I'm not discouraged by not getting the grants, but everything that I do and create, I put towards my art. And I think even if you can't get a grant for yourself, there's still ways to make art. You don't need the huge budget to do stuff. And it just kind of keeps me going. And maybe one day I'll land that huge grant that will help me create some of my wildest dreams that I've had. But as for right now, I'm pretty happy with what I've been able to do without that.
Well, that's great. And I'm sure you will. I mean, your work's always taking so many different forms, and it's always incredibly exciting. And I know that person will find that opportunity and work with you on it. Next question is, what do you do when you get into a creative rut, or do you use that to fuel your creativity?
The way I tackle that is I explore a different medium, whether it be me doing that medium or looking at a medium of an artist that's creating something. I'm working in different areas of art. I mean, primarily photography, but if I can't maybe I'll spend the day sketching, or if I can't do that, or I don't feel inspired to do something myself, maybe I'll watch a process video on how to build an antique table or something like that. Or maybe I'll look back to some of my favorite artists that are creating, and I'll give myself a challenge. So one thing that I've actually done recently was I created an artist prompt program where it's a PDF that you can download, and it's a 6-week program that each day it gives you a different artist prompt to do. And I created that not just for myself to get myself inspired, but for other people during this whole lockdown, to get themselves making art and being engaged and challenging themselves in different ways. Sometimes you kind of have to give yourself homework. Even if you don't want to do it, you're still getting yourself into your notebook, or you're getting yourself out into the field and photographing. You just have to stay engaged with your medium, if not try a new medium.
And I think that's so great also that these prompts are available to other artists who may find that they're stagnant with inspiration because of the challenging times that we're facing currently. And so, we're all a community and we're all here for each other. And whether it's just through the artwork that's created or, these activities or these stories, it's a wonderful place that we have. And I'm greatly appreciative of it for sure. So more questions. This one's interesting. How has voyeurism or sexuality influenced your semiotics?
I don't think it has. I feel like I'm distant from that within my work. It's something that's deeply personal that I'm creating that's very specific. I don't think I explore, I guess, world issues in my work. It's more of an internal experience. I mean, people have said like, oh, do you like BDSM? Because they've seen like lots of people tied up in ropes and stuff. It's not something that I even think about when I'm creating my work. Maybe what's cool about it is people will see things like that, and it might be a reflection of the person who's asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave my work open to interpretation. And when I'm standing in a gallery space and people are talking to me about my work and they ask a certain question, it makes me think about maybe they've related in that way, and they want to ask if I'm also relating to that too. So it almost allows, my work allows me to read other people, which is kind of cool.
Absolutely. You really get to know the person asking the questions or responding to that particular piece, and being at the gallery all the time and being privy to these conversations, whether they include me or not, is always quite fascinating because you hear some strange things, and it's not strange to them, but of course it is to us. And it only makes you imagine that here you're getting to know this person on this deeply personal level because of what they're interpreting from that piece. And it may not be the artist's intention, it may not be my interpretation, but at the end of the day, here, because of their experiences and their life thus far, this is the conclusion they came to. And it's just so fascinating, and it just leads to such interesting conversations. So yeah,
it's cool. I love it.
Really, really cool. Next question. How do you choose a particular print size for an image?
So when I first started shooting, that had to do with the limitations of my camera, where I could maybe blow up this image. Like when I was like 16 years old, I could only blow up this image this size. So that's where it's going to exist at its maximum resolution. And now what I'm able to do with I have a better camera now, I'm able to choose those sizes. It's more about the feel and like, I guess, how it exists on the wall. Maybe there's an image of mine, like for example, there's a small detail here where if I printed this image smaller, you wouldn't catch the small little flickering flame burning the rope that's tied to the anvil that might fall on my character. If this image was 7x7, you'd never catch that, but I can create a huge print of that, and that allows the viewers to pick up on the really tiny details that I choose to put in.
I think so. And I think also at the larger scale that they are, at these, what I have here, these two 22 by 22 inch pieces, as well as the 42 by 42 inch behind you, they're quite immersive at this scale. And they do command the wall and the viewer that's taking them in. And I think that it allows that person to fall even deeper into the imagery and into the mood that you've created. And I think that visually, it's quite effective.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Was there a time when you lost confidence, and what did you do to overcome it?
I mean, I've been struggling with confidence ever since I started this project, just because I was even just afraid to share what was going on with me out of fear of judgment. I mean, I'll spend maybe like a week or 2 weeks creating a prop, and I'll bring it out to the fields or to the marshland, and I'll set up this entire shoot, and it completely is a train wreck. And I'm like, did I just spend 2 weeks creating this for nothing? I feel like mindset has a lot to do with overcoming lack of confidence, and I'm slowly building that. I mean, I'm definitely not the most confident person in the world, but my art has given me the ability to have confidence. And as long as you know that you've learned something from each experience, you can take one little thing, or you can re-explore an idea in a different way at a different time. I feel like you'll be better off. Like, for example, the wishing well shoot, I did create a wishing well prior to that one, and I went out to the location, and it started to have a snowstorm, and me and my model actually both got blown and tipped over while we were in the well,
Oh,
and we fell into
no.
the freezing water,
Oh,
and it was destroyed. So like, I had spent 2 weeks on building that well, and then what I did was I rebuilt it and I re-engineered it, and I went on a day where I knew there wasn't going to be a crazy snowstorm. So I feel like you just have to keep pushing it. Like, you're not going to get better until you keep pushing yourself and exploring that. And I think art makes it easy to do that.
absolutely. And learning from these lessons and knowing, in the future how to better attack certain challenges.
Correct.
Okay, what do you make of viewing the human subject as a walking painting, using the body as a canvas, maybe an abstraction for landscapes?
Like, as in me approaching that in like a literal sense, like me going out and experimenting in that type of medium. Is that?
I'm not sure how they wish for it to be interpreted.
It sounds interesting. I've
It
never done
does. It's a
anything like
very
that.
deep question. I'm not sure where they want us to go with it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you don't mind elaborating, he had another or she had another question, which we'll get to now, and then
Okay.
with that elaboration, we'll come back.
Sure.
Where in the body begins to merge or become like a furniture and encompass the pictorial qualities or the perception of landscapes or objects? That's another deep one.
Yeah. I feel like I'm a more like visual interpreter. Like, I would love to see that question and be able to pick apart and join the words together. Um, I'm trying to think about. I'll try to answer it loosely. Where, like, how does the human body, like, for example, the piece there where the chairs are encompassing the figure. Um, like, I can create a symbol of this character crawling out of a dark hole, but there's no hole actually there, but the chairs and the table all create a weight, like he's climbing out of some sort of cave or maybe an implosion that's occurred. Like, I can create different, I guess, suggestions of scenarios through furniture and through the human element. I feel like I kind of butchered that, or if maybe that's not
It's
the
a
right.
tough
Yeah.
question, and it's uncertain, specifically what kind of answer they're looking for. But it's a good question because it
You
can go
can
in
send
so
me
many
that.
ways.
Send me that to my inbox, and I'll explore the idea and type it out.
Yeah, thank you for that question, or both questions, and such thought into
Sure.
Nicholas's work. So, two more questions from me, and then we'll start to close out.
Okay.
Your artwork often has titles that originate in Italian. We know that you're part Italian and part Greek. So, tell us a bit more about your heritage and how it influences your work.
Sure. Yeah, I'm very proud of the family I've come from and the background and the heritage I've experienced just through growing up, and even going to Italy in college and studying and living for a temporary period of time where my ancestors came from. And I feel that the Italian language expresses things in a certain way that I feel like relates to my work. I can't really describe why, but I like to pay homage to my family and my heritage through using those titles, or maybe looking at Italian artists for inspiration when I'm doing this, or even Greek artists too. Um, I'm using like props from my great grandmother, from other parts of my family within the work, and I feel like it just adds another special element to it that might otherwise be missing.
Absolutely. And something that I've always found that I'm quite fond of in your work is the idea that these are dire situations, but there's always a suggestion of hope. They're not inescapable. You're not going to drown and get covered in furniture. Something's going to happen. And whether that's up to you or perhaps outside forces, there's always a light. And I think there's always a positive turn to the story available to the viewer. And so do you find that you think that way too about your work? Or is that just my interpretation?
I do like to add an escape, but my work is dark, but it comes from a positive place, if that makes sense.
And
Like,
it has positive effects.
right. And maybe it's what the viewer interprets of that, or maybe I literally do it. Like, for example, in my 2-part image where the escape artist part 1 and part 2, where the first part of the image, this character is tied to a chair and he's being tormented and having an apple shot off of his head. But in the second part of the image, he's uplifted himself in his chair and he's running down the pathway blindfolded while being chased. He's escaping the situation even though he's tied to a chair. So I do like to allow for an area of escape to positivity. Maybe it doesn't exist in a literal sense, but it's definitely woven in there.
Absolutely. I mean, you have both, I guess methods of the story panning out depending on how you feel. If perhaps you're feeling glum one day, maybe you might see this as a reflection of your mood and that you do feel like you're drowning and you don't know what will happen from there. But then at other points, you might see that brightness and that bit of hope. I think it's awesome. And I think with the Escape Artist 1 and 2 also, even though in the Escape Artist 1, the apple is being shot at, but the title itself gives someone hope that this person has experienced situations like this and they will get through it. And I think that that's another very strong connecting drive of, oh, perfect.
I actually have it right here, which is kind of funny.
Good.
I don't know if it'll fit in the frame. Let me just move back.
There you guys go. And
I don't have 2 with me, but this is just a sample print of that.
yeah, that's fantastic. That was in Nicholas's first show at the gallery. And
correct.
Yeah, it was they were both very well received images. So it's always interesting to see also when people, acquire his work, which ones they pick in particular and why it resonates with them. And you really, as we mentioned before, get to know people on such a personal level through, this communication tool. And they want to adorn their walls with it and wake up and live with these pieces every day. And it's extremely special, for sure.
Right.
One other thing that I want to talk about, and then we'll start to close out, an ethereal booth who had sent the very deep questions earlier, they sent some more over. But again, if you can just DM Nick after this, Nicholas, sorry. Yeah, he'll be happy to get into it more with you because it definitely is a very visual question, as he mentioned. But let's talk about your jewelry. Not too long ago, you ventured into jewelry making as a way to focus on some of the symbolic elements of your work. Tell us a bit more about how you came about that. If you have any pieces that you might want to show us, we'd love to see. And just let everyone know also where they can learn more about these pieces.
There we go. Sorry, you cut out for a second. Oh, are you there?
Yep.
Cool. Sorry, it cut out.
Yep, I'm here.
So the jewelry collection you were talking about?
Yeah. Did I come through all the way or did I cut out?
You cut out. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're cutting out a little bit too. I wonder what's happening. Let's give it a minute, guys. I'm sorry for the technical glitch. Let's see if this helps, just giving it some time.
Okay. So you had said you had started talking about the jewelry collection?
Yeah. So again, talking about you being such a Renaissance man and jumping from various mediums to explore your dreams and your creation. What is it about jewelry that brought you to that particular medium? How did you explore it? And why did you choose the symbols that you did from your work?
So I find that...
Yeah, I think you're frozen.
I'm frozen. Okay.
You know what? I'm going to close you out, and then maybe you'll join us back in.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. All right. I'm going to close it out. I will invite you. Sorry, guys. I'm going to bring him back. Nicholas, oh, here you are. Okay. You weren't popping up. Oh, no, it's telling me you're unable to join. Nicholas, if you can send me a request, maybe we can get you in that way. If not, we'll close out. Oh, here you go. Let's try it. Let's hope he comes back. Perfect. Okay, we're back.
I have no idea what happened.
I don't know either. But thank you guys for that. Thank you, Nicholas, for bearing with that technical problem.
Sure.
So yes, so I'd like you to show off some of your jewelry if you have any available. Let people know where they can learn more about it and just giving us the background behind it.
Sure. I don't have anything with me, unfortunately, but there's a lot of aspects of my work that are small, like small details. Like, for example, in the Richizo image where there's scissors coming out of the water and clipping the rope that's connecting the two characters. I wanted to take those smaller aspects of my creations and also maybe some of the drawings I've made, or maybe an image that can fit within a small oval or wax seal stamp, and create them as tangible objects that people can bring and wear wherever they want. Because, I mean, a lot of people buy artwork, but not a lot of people can afford to do that. Or maybe they love artwork, but they have to keep that in their house. And a lot of people now live in small apartments, so it's hard to hang up large pieces of work. But now what I want to do is allow people to take these small like talismans or little small sculptures that I've created as jewelry, and they can wear that and bring that with them every day in their life. I think it's just a more accessible way to enjoy art and have it be a part of your being rather than just stuck on your wall at home.
I think so. I think that some people truly like to wear their art, on their skin. So whether it be through tattoos or jewelry or their clothes, it's how they want to share themselves with the world. And these are extensions of themselves that can be spoken without words. And it's a wonderful thing. And the jewelry pieces are quite beautiful. So
Thank you.
if you guys, you're welcome, haven't seen them, I would definitely check them out. And I think we're going to wrap up now.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you so much for your time, Nicholas. And thank you guys for all your questions and all your wonderful comments and praise for Nicholas's work. And we look forward to Nicholas's future body as he attacks the tarot card deck. And as always, feel free if you have questions after this to send them to Nicholas or myself through DM. And if you have questions about pricing, as someone asked earlier, I'm happy to talk to you about that too, as well as anything else that might come up. So thank you all so much. Thank you again, Nicholas. And I wish you guys all the best, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.